Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Cabin. I'm your host, Joey Leone, right out here in the desert, and it's 100 degrees outside, so I figured I'd come inside, lower the lights a little bit, and put the air conditioner on and give you another podcast here. And this is one of my most requested, but it's not a song. This is one of the most requested stories when I get together with friends and family that know me a long time, and this is the story about the $7 suit. Now, back in the day, in the 70s, I had an uncle of mine, and he used to get stuff down from the docks, or stuff that fell off the back of the truck, as they used to say, and I would sell stuff. I had a partner, this kid named Marty. He was a couple of years younger than me, a real, kind of fresh-faced kid. He was a master thief, the kid, and we made a lot of money together, me and Marty, back in the day. And we'd get the stuff from my Uncle Mello. That's right, my Uncle Carmelo, but everybody called him Mello, which is got to be one of the coolest names ever. So Uncle Mello we'd get the stuff from too, and I also would get North Carolina cigarettes from him, like cartons of cigarettes. They drive like a tractor trailer to Brooklyn with, thousands of cases of these North Carolina cigarettes, and I would sell these cigarettes too. We did this for years with my uncle, made good money with him. And then when I was working in dialysis down in downtown Brooklyn, a lot of the West Indian Spanish people and stuff, they would buy a lot of my stuff that I would get from my uncle. They'd also buy cartons of cigarettes. Every week I'd have people buy cartons of cigarettes from me. And what do we make? Maybe 50 cents, 40 cents on a carton of cigarettes. But when you're selling 100 cartons of cigarettes, you're doing okay. And it was easy. Nobody was bothering you. And, in those days, especially in the 70s, people loved to buy hot stuff. I don't know, it was something about the allure of oh, yeah, that's hot stuff. Yeah, oh, yeah, we'll take it. And there were times even when me and Marty wouldn't have stuff to sell from my uncle because, he would say, oh, I ain't got nothing this week, or he had something. Usually we would sell, from my uncle, we would, designer jeans. This is the 70s, like Sergio Valenti jeans or Sasson jeans. We would sell Kiana shirts. They were big those nylon shirts that John Travolta used to wear back in the day. We would sell Italian leather shoes. We would sell those cool see-through socks that people used to sell in the old days. Ladies' clothes, ladies' lingerie. We would sell, not real fur coats, but fake fur coats or camel hair jackets, coats, there were these knit sweaters we used to sell. We had a ton of stuff we used to sell. And my uncle would get great stuff. And, costume jewelry sometimes. But the cigarettes were a weekly thing you could definitely do. And I had a lot of beauty salons in those days. They had beauty salons. And they would sell stuff out of the back of the place for me. So I would consign them stuff and they would sell the stuff. And, we did pretty good. And I had an old Jewish guy who owned a tire shop up on Utica Avenue in Brooklyn. And he was a Hasidim, but he was great, and he loved me. And, he was another guy to buy anything hot. I don't know what he'd do with it. Maybe he'd try to resell it or whatever. But he owned a big tire shop, had a bunch of guys working for him, and do front-end alignments and tires and brakes. So, we ended up doing pretty good. And, it was a lucrative business. So, I also used to sell, fake jewelry, too, Onega watches. We sold, not Omega watches, Onega watches. And a quick story I'll tell you about the Onega watches was that I used to sell them. I think I sold them for $30 a piece, but they looked like real authentic Omega watches. And but they had the battery in them. They weren't real automatic watches. They had a battery in them. Most people would buy them. They liked them. And maybe 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, the battery would die. And most people would either, take it to a jeweler or they would throw it out because it was a cheap watch. Anyway, but the story was there was a kid from the neighborhood who bought one of these watches from me. And every time I'd see him, he'd go, hey, Joey, I love that watch you sold me. It's a great watch. And I said, yeah, his name was Danny. I said, yeah, Danny, thanks. Yeah, if you ever get any more of those watches, I love that watch. Meanwhile, he's telling me this one time, and I'm like, it's been like 2 years since I sold him that watch. He still got the watch for 2 years. But he had some kind of weird kinetic energy, this guy, I guess, that batteries wouldn't drain when it was when it was strapped to his body. I guess he was, maybe he was an alien or something. I don't know. But he was a nice kid from the neighborhood, really nice kid. Anyway, one day I'm coming home from work and a couple of the neighborhood knock-around guys come over to see me and they go, yeah, you heard about Danny? I said, what happened? He goes, yeah, he got the cops had to come get him and take him out of Macy's. He was up in Macy's. I said, well, it's none of my business. He goes, no, he was dropping your name left and right. Matter of fact, when the cops were there, he kept, saying your name. I said, really? I said, what's he saying my name for? Well, it turns out Danny, the watch finally stopped working. And he went up to to Macy's because he saw that they had Omega watches. And it was the exact model of the one he had, the fake one. But they were the real one. And he goes to the guy, he goes, yeah, I want that watch. I had one before. He goes, yeah, I want that watch. The guy goes, well, you got very good taste. That's an excellent Omega watch. And he goes, yeah, Omega, whatever. He goes, and the guy goes, that's $350. $350? What are you talking about? I bought the same watch from Joey Leone for $30. What are you talking? You rip me off? What kind of rip-off place? The guy says, well, I don't know who this Joey Leone is, but this is a very expensive watch. And he's going, yeah, no, but Joey sold it to me for $30. It lasted. Meanwhile, the guy gets mad. He finally ends up calling the security in the King's Plaza. They call the cops because Danny's not going, quietly. And they end up taking him out of it. He didn't get in trouble, and they just told him, they think they might have trespassed him or something. So anyway, we had a lot of good stuff we used to sell. But getting back to my friend on Utica Avenue, the Hasidim guy, his name was Menachem. And he loved buying stuff from me. He used to buy a lot of T-shirts and like underwear and stuff like that. He probably sold them. Who knows what he did with them. But he was a good customer. And then one day I went there to, to see him, and he says, and a couple of days before that, I had ran into my uncle, who was, I used to get the stuff from, and I said, he said, I got nothing this week. He goes, hey, Joey, you got to do me a favor. I said, what? He goes, you got to take these suits. I said, suits? He says, yeah, they got suits. He goes, and he opens up the trunk of his car, and it's leisure suits. I'm like, Uncle Mel, I said, nobody buys leisure suits anymore. They're extinct. Now, they were good for a while, but nobody buys them. Nobody wears them anymore. You get laughed out of the neighborhood if you wear leisure. Joey, I know. Look, you do okay with me. Do me a favor. Take these suits. I got 50 of them. He said $7 a piece. He said, that's what I paid for them, $7. I said, Uncle Mel, nobody's going to buy them. He goes, look, just put them in the trunk of your car. So meanwhile, I got to put these 50 suits in the trunk of the car. The good thing about them is they came in like a plastic wrapper. So they were pretty compressed, They were polyester. It was a jacket, pants, and a vest, 3 pieces. But they were very light. So they so meanwhile, the Lincolns had a big trunk. And so meanwhile, in those days, when you're taking schwag in the car, of course, you never keep the spare in the car because you keep a lot. So that's where the spare went. So I had the spare back at the house. So anyway, I got these suits in the car for months at a time. And I'm going to see my friends. I'm going to see the people that are buying stuff from me. And I'm telling people, I got these suits. And people are like, no thanks, Joey. Anyway, so I'm up on Utica Avenue one day and dropping off some T-shirts and some tube socks to my friend over at the tire shop. And he goes, that's all you got for me? You ain't got nothing else for me, Joey? I said, nah, nothing. He goes, what's that at the bottom of the car, in the trunk? I said, it's these suits I got from my uncle. I said, these leisure suits. And he says, oh, my God, they're terrible, the colors. Because the colors were like, olive green with light green piping, burgundy with pink piping on them. I mean, they were the weirdest colors in the world. You walk down the street, you look like a toucan. So I says, yeah, these are suits my uncle stuck me with. He said, well, I hope you didn't get hurt too bad with them. I said, it was only $7. He goes, $7 for a suit? I said, yeah. I go, why? Know anybody interested? I'll give them the whole thing. $350. He goes, how many suits you got? 50? I said, yeah. I'll take all of them. Put it on my bill, no problem. So he takes all the suits from me. I'm figuring, who is he going to sell these things to? Anyway, he was a really good guy, and I would send people to his tire shop to get their tires rotated, or they had a flat, or maybe they need a front end alignment or brakes and stuff. And I said, well, just tell me with Joey Leone, and he'll take good care of you. He wouldn't rob anybody that came from me. He was legit. The guy had a ton of guys work for him. It was a big shop. Anyway, I had a buddy of mine I had sent over there, I think for a front end alignment or something like that. And he comes to me, he goes, "Hey, Joey, I went to see your friend over there. Thanks. He took care of me on Utica Avenue." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "The guy that did my front end alignment was wearing one of your suits." I said, "What do you mean he's wearing one of my suits? What do you mean?" He goes, those suits, remember the ones your uncle stuck you with? You were laughing about, you couldn't get rid of? Yeah. He said, "I looked around. Everybody working in the guy's shop is wearing the suits." And I'm thinking to myself, when I sold him the suits, he brought his son out and he asked him, how much did we pay to get the guy's uniforms? Because he had the guys in uniforms. They were like the coverall uniforms, for the guys working on the cars. And I guess he bought the suits and gave them to all the guys that worked for him. So meanwhile, so I couldn't believe it. So I drove up there. I didn't even have nothing. I went to see him. He's like, "Joey, you got something to show me?" I said, "No, nothing today. I just wanted to stop by and say hi." And I'm looking, and there's a guy laying underneath the car with a purple pair of pants on. And I'm like, oh my God, he gave these guys the suits to wear. And for the next year, every time I would send somebody there or I'd go there to pick up a couple of dollars, those suits never went away. They were there for the whole duration. And it was unbelievable. The $7 polyester suits. Well, the end of the story is about a couple of years later. I'm at one of the first multiplex studios that was down in like Sheepshead Bay. They had the first multiplex. I think it was like on Knapp Street in Brooklyn. They had a multiplex movie theater, and I was going there with my girlfriend at the time to go see a movie. And there's a really good-looking Spanish guy in there with his wife, and they're waiting online because you got to wait online to get in the movies. And I'm noticing he has one of the vests on. He must have worked for the old guy. I didn't want to ask him. I don't want to embarrass the guy, but he accessorized one of the vests to go with his outfit, and it actually worked pretty good, But there it was, one of the polyester vests from the $7 suits that had made it a couple of years later into the movie theater. Anyway, so another happy story, another story with great moral to it, of course. Always buy a cheap suit if you can. You'll always find a place for it. Anyway, that's the story, one of my most requested stories of the $7 suit. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for coming down to the Tales from the Cabin podcast. I'm your host, Joey Leone, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, bye.